Hello, and welcome to another episode of Poetry FM 101. This is my favorite corner in the world, and now it can be yours too. I'm your host, Nitin George, and this is Poetry FM 101, your weekly dose of poetry. So get ready to have your heartstrings plucked by the sweet melody of words, dance to the rhythm of rhymes, and swim in the sweet symphony of sonnets. And so, let's dive into poetry and ensure that you have a poetic day ahead. Okay, so as you all know, it's time to have another guest, another poet. But we all know the drill. This is going to be a very anonymous session where you get to connect with my guest and the poet for this week based on their poem and poem alone. And I will, of course, be introducing this poet and unveiling the mystery about who they are in the upcoming episode. So it is my pleasure to welcome my guest and the poet for this week. So, dear guest, can we have you recite one of your poems?
Sometimes I dance at work, a symphony of the mind and heart. Each step, a moment of joy. The music in the background refuses to stop. Thank you, doctor, she's fine, a voice whispers. Sometimes I dance at work. I think they can see.
Wow, that was really something. And as a follow-up question, I have to ask, do you remember the first time that you recited a poem in front of an audience? How was the experience, and what did you feel?
The first time I recited a poem would be, as far as I remember, it would probably be at a Poets of Bangalore event.
Okay.
And
So quite late in your life, like.
yeah, but very, very impromptu. And I just gone to attend it to listen to the other poets. And I just spoke to the organizing team and they said, yeah, there's a vacant spot. And I said, why not give it a shot?
Give it a shot. And there was no looking back after that.
No looking back.
And how was that experience? Like, when you recite a poem in front of an audience, and how did that feel? Was it really enjoyed? Was it liberating? Did you want to do more of it?
So I really enjoyed the whole experience because, to be honest, I didn't know that I had this side to me. And to perform in front of people and connect with people was a very fulfilling experience.
That's good to know. And I suppose after that, you've sort of continued attending these events and continue reciting your poetry. I've heard some of your poems on Instagram, and I have to say, you truly feel the poem when you recite it. It's like, you're sort of going back in time, reliving, recollecting that particular experience and, reciting it all over again. So another question, have you ever written a poem for someone? I don't mean to say that poetry is all about the romantic aspects of life, but has there ever been a point in time when you've written a poem for someone?
So I have written poems for my wife.
Okay, that's good to know.
So
lucky woman. All right.
So in the last few months, my genre of poetry has changed a bit.
All right.
Yeah. So
so what was the occasion, and how did the person react to it? I'm guessing anniversary or
no. So this was while we were dating, and so just before we got married. So during the dating period and even post engagement. So she's one of the strongest women that I've met, and she inspires me every day. And in my own way, I felt poetry would in some form would do justice to what she brings to my life.
Right. Wow. That's really something. Okay, that's good to know. Can we have you recite another one of your poems?
Non-romantic.
Non-romantic. But feel free to bring in the romantic element too,
The micro poem. A dream wants to take flight. The dreamer hesitates to tag along. I'm afraid of flying, says the dreamer. That's why you should, whispers the dream.
Wow. Okay. What was, I think, let's say, if you had to look back and identify one poem which was written at a very profound moment is there one such poem that, was written at a point of time that was very intense, and you look back at it as one of the most powerful pieces that you ever written?
So I think let me recite it.
All right. And then you can sort of give a background to it.
Yeah. Symphony. A young man breathes his last, while an old woman gets a new lease on life. My work is a symphony of heartbreak and love. My heart, chiseled on days, chipped away on others, with all its layers exposed. Sometimes I am the sculptor, and sometimes the statue. On days, my heart is a child lost in the rain, in search of an umbrella. And on days, it is the rain helping a flower grow. As I close my eyes, I can picture the garden bloom.
That was really, thought provoking. Can you give us an insight into how that came to be? What was the idea behind it?
So, like I'd mentioned, a lot of my poems are born out of my medical experiences. And, as doctors, we deal with life and death day in, day out, and also the uncertainties of life, to be specific. So, using different sorts of imagery, I wanted to convey the sentiment of life and death in the juxtaposition of a young man passing away versus, say, an elderly patient getting discharged from the hospital. And in so many ways, we have to deal with these uncertainties day in, day out. And this was my way of penning it down.
Yeah, and I think that last line, or the second last line, captures the irony and the duality of it. Sometimes I am the sculpture, and sometimes I am the what was that?
Sometimes I'm the statue.
I'm the statue. Yeah, um, yeah. I love that you bring out these contrasts of life. You bring out these dualities of. Has that always been an element of your poetry? Is that you always try to have this, how do I say, opposing view that's at peace with each other, but at the same time opposed to each other, because life is all about such dualities, right?
So actually, I never planned on, like, I like to play around with metaphors and looking at things from a different perspective, the light within the darkness, and
Right. Yeah.
and that's also reflected in the cover design of my book. So it's my take on the yin and yang symbol. So duality has been, if you look at it, has been a part of some of my poems, but I've not really made a conscious effort to sort of imbibe it into each poem. I think that's just been very, very organic.
So yeah, I think that's just a part of your experience and your poetry taking form very organically, very naturally, right? But to the listener, to the observer, that does come across, and it's a very powerful element in there too. So coming back to a very pertinent question, and also a very pertinent idea that people have about poetry. I've heard this phrase one too many times, that poets are romantics at heart, or poetry is a romantic thing, and I've also had the privilege of meeting other poets who are rebels, who speak about the rebellion of poetry, the politics through poetry, and here you are as a doctor talking about healing through poetry. So would you say that poets are romantics at heart? And also, what does being a romantic mean to you?
So to some extent, yes, poets are romantics at heart.
Okay.
Okay, so romance or love can be looked at from different perspectives. So, when you look at, rather than using the word romance, I would probably focus on love from different perspectives. So, like love from the perspective of a healer, love in the form of friendship, love in the form of romance. Some of them, yes, I think by and large, most poets are romantics at heart. It doesn't always get reflected in the poetry. And maybe some of them are in denial about that as well.
Right.
But when it comes to, say, my genre, I wouldn't probably specify or label a genre. I would say that I'm a hopeful dreamer who likes to heal.
Right. So you go with the hopeful dreamer and not the hopeful romantic as such. Okay. I think that begs the question, is the current journey that you're on in life, what you do right now, has this always been something that you wanted to do, or was this just something that happened along the way and you decided that, yeah, it fits, so I'll just go with it?
With regards to my career,
Yeah.
so I think back in high school, I knew that I wanted to be a doctor. So I wanted to help others. And probably at the age of 13 or 14, I knew that this is my
This is your
calling.
calling, right?
This is
Right.
my calling. And I really felt the urge to answer that call. There's been no looking back.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, on that note, could you maybe recite another one of your poems? This time, perhaps something that maybe has a lot of reflection involved in it.
When you wonder where I am, when you wonder where I am, look outside your window and I'll be there. I'm the sky, unafraid of change, blue to pink to red. I'm the bird, soaring high, never losing sight of its nest. I'm the star that reminds you of your worth. I'm the tree whose branches are tender and broken and yet provide shade. And if you still can't find me, look within. I am where I'm supposed to be.
Wow. So the I am that you're referring to, are you referring to the how do I say, the ethereal super natural power that is inside all of us?
So I think that's the beauty of poetry, right? It's subject to interpretation.
Interpretation, yes, absolutely.
So what I am trying to convey through this poem is union with nature, unification with nature. Like I mentioned before, I love to play around with imagery.
Right. Yeah. That's one of the very powerful aspects about your poem, right? And I have to ask, are you a believer?
So I'm a definite believer in miracles, nature, science, philosophy. I'm in fact studying philosophy as well.
Oh, okay.
And I think there's so many things, that so many occurrences in the world which defy the laws of probability.
Right.
And when you see this happening, I think the fact that we are alive, and if you look at the bigger context, and if you look at the bigger picture, say us sitting in a park, or just sitting under the shade of a tree, provides so much perspective in terms of the miracles that nature has to offer.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think oneness with nature, acceptance of that opens our eyes to a lot of wonders that are in store.
Speaking of, miracles, have you observed or have you witnessed events or situations in your profession, in your life, that defy logic and reasoning, and that should not have been the case, but it ended up being?
So we deal with a lot of critical patients almost on a daily basis. So there are a couple of instances where patients with prolonged ICU stay,
Right.
even some of the other doctors had sort of written off the chances of the patient
Recovery.
making a recovery.
Right.
But the sense of faith that you have in what you do, why you do it, and sometimes just the possible outcome of the patient actually making that miraculous recovery
Right.
keeps you going.
Right.
And I've had these instances where patients have come out of the ICU, they've been there for almost a month, and they've made it through. Probably those are the most rewarding experiences as a doctor. And for once, even though I would like to believe that I'm a poet, words can't do justice, and I can't articulate that feeling.
True that. True that. Well, I think you're quite a humble person to admit that some things are just beyond expression through words. I think that about concludes the audio version of our podcast. It was such an honor and pleasure to listen to your poems and your poetry. And we will be meeting again in the next episode. And before we close it off, is there anything that you'd like to tell the audience, just to sort of motivate them to tune in for the next episode? What can they expect? I'm sure they're curious about who this poet is. So what would you like to tell them?
I would not like to tell them too much, but I would recite another poem.
All right.
I wish for you to know. I wish for you to know that the sun kisses you on days when you don't feel loved. The rain is here to wash away the pain, even though you're not good at hiding it. The moon understands you, for she too goes through phases. The earth feels your presence every time you walk. I wish for you to know.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, now we know that you have to tune in for the next episode because this poet brings a lot of warmth and love. And I wish for you to meet this person, as I talk to them face to face. So definitely tune in. I'm closing out this audio podcast here. This is where I'll have to leave you, but I will be back again next episode with a face to face conversation with our guest for the week. Until then, take care. Have a great day ahead.